Who invited her? The words cut through the air like a knife, delivered with a sneer that carried both arrogance and intent. Daniel Crawford III, heir to one of the richest families in America, had accidentally brushed his shoulder against Maya Carter's arm. The deliberate shove sent his champagne spilling across her silk blouse, a spreading stain like a wound against the cream-colored fabric. 20 executives froze in the gleaming boardroom, then erupted in laughter. The sound was sharp, cruel, and echoing. The long mahogany table, polished so highly it caught every shard of golden sunlight pouring in from the windows, became an arena of ridicule. The stain wasn't just on her blouse. It was a mark, a target. Maya Carter didn't flinch. Her expression was carved from stone, her movements deliberate as she dabbed at her blouse with Daniel's smug, offered handkerchief. He smirked, already savoring what he thought was victory. Daniel's father, Charles Crawford, leaned forward with the kind of smile that showed teeth, but no warmth. His voice was slow, rich, full of condescension. "Perhaps she's lost, son. The service entrance is downstairs, my dear." The room laughed again, a tradition of cruelty, passed from father to son. But beneath the table, Maya's phone buzzed once, the screen lighting up. One simple message. Confirmed. $5 billion acquisition ready for your signature. She pressed the screen face down, her eyes never leaving Daniel's mocking grin. They thought she was powerless. They thought she was an intruder. What they didn't know was that Maya Carter held the power to erase everything the Crawfords owned in less than a day. 3 hours earlier, the story had begun differently. A modest gray electric sedan rolled into the visitor parking lot of Crawford Global Tower, its glass facade rising 62 stories into the morning sky. Old money gleamed in every corner of the building's design. Cold steel, polished stone, a monument to privilege. Maya Carter parked in the visitor's space and adjusted the lapel of her navy suit. Tailored but not flashy. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, her movements precise. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Not vanity, but preparation. Her armor wasn't fabric and it was composure. At the executive entrance, 2 security guards blocked her path. Their eyes flicked over her with immediate suspicion. One, a tall man with a square jaw, stepped forward, voice curt. "Deliveries are around back. Ma'am." His gaze swept her up and down as though the very idea of her standing before him was an insult. Maya held up her visitor badge. Calm. Even. "I have an appointment with Daniel Crawford. Acquisition meeting. 4th floor boardroom." The guards exchanged a glance. Then, as though rehearsed, the second one smirked. "You'll want the service elevator. The executive lifts are for executives." Her reply was measured, unshaken. "I'm aware, and I'd like to see your visitor policy, please." The guard frowned, caught off guard by her composure. He radioed his supervisor, and after a tense wait, her appointment was confirmed. They stepped aside reluctantly, their faces tight with disapproval. Maya Carter walked through without a single wasted motion. Behind her, the whispers began. In front of her, the walls of the Crawfords' empire rose higher. Inside the boardroom, the Crawfords were already congratulating themselves. Charles Crawford swirled his glass of morning scotch, the amber liquid catching the light like fire. His voice rumbled with disdain. "This so-called diversity investment firm. They're overpaying by at least $1 billion, idiots." Daniel laughed, tugging at the knot of his Italian silk tie. "They want to look progressive. We're unloading a failing division and getting praised for it. Pure genius," Charles snorted. "In my day, we didn't have to entertain people like that in boardrooms. Deals were made at the club, on the golf course. Places that mattered." The Crawfords clinked their glasses, smug, confident, entirely unprepared. The elevator opened on the executive floor. Maya Carter stepped out. She approached the receptionist, who didn't even look up before speaking. "Janitorial services sign in downstairs." Maya's reply was steady, calm. "I'm Maya Carter, here for the acquisition meeting." The receptionist chuckled, waiting for the punchline. But when Maya produced her identification and the meeting confirmation, the woman's smile faltered. She made a hurried call. Inside the boardroom, Daniel's face soured as he answered. "Some woman claiming to be from Carter Holdings is here," he repeated incredulously. "Fine, send her up." As Maya walked down the long hallway, she passed walls lined with photographs of the Crawfords. golf clubs, fundraisers, yacht parties, handshakes with senators. One frame caught her eye. Daniel Crawford shaking hands with Senator Harlan, the chairman of the Financial Oversight Committee. Her fingertips brushed against the sleek curve of her watch. Hidden inside was a recording device, silent, unseen, always listening. When she entered the boardroom, silence fell. 12 pairs of eyes locked onto her. 11 men, 1 woman. All white, all wealthy, all surprised. Daniel rose halfway from his seat, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. He looked past her as though expecting someone else. "You must be Ms. Carter's assistant." Her reply was cold steel wrapped in silk. "I am Maya Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings." The room shifted. The temperature dropped. Daniel's hand hung suspended in midair before he reluctantly shook hers. Charles Crawford chuckled, his laugh brittle. "We just expected someone else." Maya took the seat directly across from Daniel. Calm, composed, dangerous. "Shall we begin the discussion of the Eastbrook acquisition?" She opened her portfolio. The war had started. Daniel's smirk lingered as he leaned back in his chair, feigning casualness. "Of course. Let's talk business." He snapped his fingers and a glass of champagne appeared in front of him. He didn't offer Maya one. His arrogance filled the room like a fog. Maya slid several sheets of paper from her leather portfolio and placed them neatly on the polished table. Her voice was calm, yet every word carried weight. "Your prospectus indicates a projected 15% growth, but your own quarterly filings suggest a negative 3% decline. Can you explain that discrepancy?" The room shifted again. Executives exchanged nervous glances. Daniel blinked, thrown off for the briefest moment before recovering. "The growth metrics are forward-looking," he said, speaking slowly as though she were a child. "Business valuation can be quite complex." Maya's lips curved ever so slightly, though not in a smile. "Complex, yes, but not contradictory." A flush crept up the neck of the only woman in the room, her nameplate reading Clara Hayes, Operations Director. She focused on her notepad as though it might shield her from what was unfolding. Maya flipped another page, unhurried. "Your employee retention rates claim 80%. Yet the Department of Labor filings show closer to 40. Which number is true?" Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes darted around the table. No one spoke. His father coughed, filling the silence. "Perhaps we're getting too deep into the weeds, Ms. Carter. These details bore everyone. Let's not drown in paperwork when we should be celebrating." He lifted his glass in a mock toast. Several executives laughed on cue. Daniel clapped once, sharp and commanding. "Champagne. Bring more in here. We'll toast to our new partnership." When the champagne arrived, every glass was filled, except Maya's. The server hovered, uncertain, until Daniel waved him away with a sly grin. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," he said with exaggerated concern. "Did they miss you?" "Allow me." He rose, bottle in hand, and poured. His hand jerked suddenly, and golden liquid cascaded down her blouse. Gasps and laughter erupted. Daniel's grin widened as he pressed a pocket square into her hand. "Designer silk, isn't it? What a shame." Maya accepted the cloth, dabbing carefully, her face unchanging. "Accidents happen," she said softly, her voice betraying nothing. But beneath the table, her finger hovered above her phone screen. A single contact, Protocol Omega. Daniel didn't notice. He was already leaning back again, pleased with his performance. "To lighten the mood," Charles Crawford said, settling deeper into his leather chair, "we have a little tradition. Each guest shares an amusing story." He launched into a tale about a diversity hire at his golf club who couldn't tell the difference between clubs, sending the room into chuckles. The executives followed one after another, piling on anecdotes designed to draw lines between themselves and her. Private school jokes, vacation home mishaps, club membership disasters. The message was clear. You don't belong here. When Maya's turn approached, Daniel leaned forward. "Perhaps we should spare her the embarrassment. We all know diversity initiatives don't exactly prepare one for these social traditions." The laughter rolled again, rehearsed and cruel. Maya's voice sliced through it. "I was just remembering my years at Harvard Business School." Daniel cut her off with a laugh sharp as glass. "Ah yes, affirmative action has opened so many doors. A heartwarming success story." The executive smirked. The humiliation was relentless. Lunch arrived, An elaborate spread of caviar, truffles, imported delicacies. Daniel made a show of preparing a blini. Have you ever tasted caviar, Ms. Carter? It's quite the acquired taste. Maya's movements at the table were smooth, practiced, every gesture refined. Daniel's smile faltered when she handled the place setting with perfect ease, not missing a step. He tried again. Where do you summer, Maya? The Hamptons. Martha's Vineyard? He paused, tilting his head as though in thought. Or perhaps you stay in the city. Many do these days. She gave no reaction, no stumble, nothing for him to grasp. But in her eyes, when he wasn't looking, calculation burned. Every attempt to break her was fuel. Every insult was a stone added to the foundation of his own destruction. Daniel misread her silence as defeat. He leaned toward his father, whispering, "She'll crack before dinner." Charles gave a satisfied nod. Then it settled. They believed the stage belonged to them. But Maya Carter had already begun rewriting the script. When she rose gracefully and excused herself to the restroom, Daniel waved dismissively. The little girl's room is down the hall, he smirked. He thought he'd won. He hadn't noticed the steel in her spine, or the flicker of cold fire in her eyes as the door closed behind her, because what Maya was about to set in motion would not only ruin their deal, it would dismantle their empire. The marble sink gleamed beneath the bathroom lights as Maya leaned against the counter. For the first time since she entered the tower, her mask slipped just for a heartbeat. Her jaw tightened. Her breath came sharp and steady. Fury crackled in her eyes, but it wasn't the kind that clouded judgment. It was the kind that forged steel. She pulled out her phone. One tap, one word. Marcus, initiate Omega. Her assistant's voice came crisp, low, steady. Are you certain? Maya's gaze hardened at her reflection. I've never been more certain. Start with the financial audit, then go for their contacts. Full sweep. I want every shadow dragged into the light. Understood. Stay strong, boss. She slid the phone back into her pocket, adjusted her blazer, and when she turned away from the mirror, the mask of composure had returned, colder, sharper than before. The restroom door creaked open. Clara Hayes, the operations director, slipped inside. Her eyes darted nervously around the stalls before she whispered, I'm sorry. I should have said something. They do this to anyone who isn't one of them. Maya studied her, unreadable. How long have you worked here? 15 years. Clara's laugh was brittle. 15 years of hitting a glass ceiling so many times I could draw the cracks with my eyes closed. She hesitated, then stepped closer, her hand trembling as she pressed a small USB drive into Maya's palm. That division they're selling you, it's undervalued. Patents are pending. Technology they've hidden from the reports. I've been documenting everything. Maya closed her fingers around the drive. Why risk helping me? Clara's eyes flared with something fierce. Because I've been where you're sitting too many times. I won't watch them bury another career just because they can. Maya's face softened just slightly. Then you've chosen the right moment. By the time she returned to the boardroom, something had shifted. Subtle but undeniable. She sat straighter, moved with a confidence that unsettled even the most smug executives. Some shifted in their seats. Others tapped nervously at pens. Daniel, blind to nuance, saw none of it. He was already leaning back in his chair, pouring himself another drink. Shall we get to the terms? He asked, his tone dripping condescension. Maya nodded with a calm smile. Yes, let's. Daniel waved a hand dismissively. My legal team will handle the details. No need to trouble yourself with complexities. Of course, Maya replied evenly. My team has already reviewed the documents. Her phone buzzed quietly beneath the table. Omega in progress. Audit underway, Daniel smirked. Impressive. For a firm like yours, he leaned forward. Tell me, Maya, why us? Surely there are other opportunities more suited to your focus. She held his gaze. Carter Holdings manages $52 billion in assets. We choose our acquisitions carefully. Daniel chuckled, though his laugh was brittle. And do you even drink champagne? Or would you prefer something simpler? He raised his glass with a smirk, expecting to see her squirm. Instead, Maya raised her water glass and clinked it lightly against his. To partnerships, she said coolly. For the first time, Daniel's smile faltered. The meeting dragged on. Every question she asked was met with dismissive answers. Every concern brushed off. Each time she pointed to discrepancies, Daniel blocked his executives from responding, eager to keep control. But beneath the table, Maya's phone vibrated again. Background check complete. Family litigation history secured. The clock on the wall ticked toward mid-afternoon. The Crawfords were oblivious to the ground shifting beneath their feet. Daniel leaned back with false ease, lacing his fingers behind his head. We should discuss management structure post-acquisition. I'd recommend maintaining our current team. Some communities lack the leadership experience for operations of this scale. Maya jotted a note on her tablet without flinching. The silence in the room was heavy. Clara Hayes stared at her water glass, her knuckles white around the stem. Another buzz lit up Maya's phone. Audit complete. Discrepancies documented. Daniel tried again, louder this time. Sandra, I believe we were talking terms? Maya raised her eyes slowly. It's Maya. Oh, Daniel said with a theatrical grin. Names can be so difficult to remember. He expected a flash of anger, a crack in her calm. Instead, Maya opened another document, her voice steady. Your market projections show 16% growth next quarter. Analysts predict contraction due to supply chain disruptions. How do you explain the gap? Daniel leaned back further, smug. Well, the quaternary implications of macroeconomic vectors require advanced modeling paradigms and sophisticated algorithmic prognostication methodologies. He winked at the room, pleased with his performance. His father chuckled, slapping the table. In my day, deals weren't made with spreadsheets. They were made on golf courses, in places that mattered. Not here, the message was clear. She didn't matter, but in the silence that followed, Maya's phone lit again. T-minus 90 minutes. Daniel didn't know it yet, but his empire was already burning. The document slid across the table with a soft scrape of leather against wood. Daniel tapped them once, leaning forward with a smirk that had only grown more insufferable as the day dragged on. We've prepared a simplified version for you, Maya, he said with mock concern. Contracts can be overwhelming. All that legal jargon. We thought it might be easier for you to have the child-friendly copy. A ripple of laughter ran around the table, weak but audible. Maya looked down at the folder, then back up at him. Her face was unreadable, but her silence stretched long enough to make several executives shift in discomfort. Finally, she closed the folder and set it gently back in front of him. That won't be necessary. I'm quite familiar with acquisition agreements. Her phone vibrated in her lap. Omega status on schedule. 50 minutes. Daniel chuckled, his laugh bouncing around the glass walls. Confidence is admirable, even when misplaced. Charles leaned forward, his heavy ring catching the light. Perhaps we should help her understand what she's stepping into. When one company acquires another, obligations transfer. It's not as simple as moving furniture, you see. He spoke slowly, each word laced with condescension as if teaching a child to spell. Maya nodded politely. Of course. I appreciate the explanation. Around the table, the executives' phones began to buzz one after another. Some frowned, sliding them discreetly under the table. Whispered exchanges began. The atmosphere shifted, tension crawling up the walls. Daniel ignored it, intoxicated by his own arrogance. Carter Holdings, he said with a scoff, is one of those diversity initiatives, isn't it? Commendable work. But you'll need guidance for years to come if you want to play at this level. Clara Hayes excused herself briefly. When she returned, her face was pale. She leaned down to whisper urgently in Daniel's ear. He waved her off with irritation. Not now, Clara. We're concluding business. He pulled the contract from the folder with a dramatic flourish, sliding it across to Maya along with a heavy Mont Blanc pen. Do you need extra time to review? Or did you bring someone to explain it to you? Maya checked her phone under the table. 4:45, one last message appeared. Omega ready. Stand by. She set the phone face down and for the first time all day, allowed herself a genuine smile. Before Daniel could interpret it, the boardroom doors swung open. 6 figures entered with sharp precision, their presence filling the room like a storm. 3 men, 3 women, diverse in background but united in purpose. Their stride was confident, their expressions carved from stone. At the front was Marcus, tall and unyielding, carrying a leather portfolio identical to Maya's. He handed it to her silently, then positioned himself behind her chair. The others took places around the perimeter, forming a wall of quiet authority. The Crawfords' laughter died instantly. Confusion spread like wildfire. Daniel rose halfway from his chair. Excuse me, this is a private meeting. Maya rose slowly, heels striking the hardwood with deliberate rhythm. She opened the portfolio and let the silence stretch until the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Then she spoke, her voice no longer restrained. It rang with command, steady and sharp. "Allow me to reintroduce myself." She moved her gaze across the table, each word cutting deeper. "I am Maya Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings, majority shareholder in Crawford Global's parent company, and the person who authorized the loan that kept this corporation alive during the recession of 2022. Daniel's face drained of color, his arrogance collapsing in real time. His father's trembling hand spilled water across the table, the glass rattling as though echoing their panic. Maya's voice sharpened further. "For 18 months, while you mocked my firm as a diversity experiment, we have been quietly purchasing shares in your parent company. What you thought was a meeting about acquiring your failing division was in truth an assessment of your leadership, your culture, your values." She turned slowly, her eyes locking on each executive in turn. "And what I've seen tells me everything I need to know." Marcus distributed documents around the table. Pages of evidence spilled across polished wood, safety violations photographed during her tour, accounting irregularities highlighted in bold, confidential settlements with employees silenced over years. Maya paused beside Clara's chair. "Clara Hayes has been documenting your practices for months. Her testimony is now part of a whistleblower case being prepared." Clara straightened, her voice steady for the first time that day. "I'm done staying quiet." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel lunged to his feet, his face twisted in rage. "This is slander. This is—" Maya tapped her watch. The recording that played filled the boardroom with his own voice. His arrogance immortalized. "They're overpaying by $1 billion, idiots. Diversity hires are good for PR, nothing more. Some communities don't belong in leadership." Every word echoed. Every sneer was replayed. Executives shifted, horrified. Some looked at him with shock, others with quiet disgust. Charles slammed his fist against the table. "You can't do this. There will be consequences." One of Maya's team stepped forward. Silver hair, sharp eyes, the presence of a man used to power. James Holden, former Attorney General, now head of Carter Holdings' legal division. "We've already assessed the consequences, and they belong to you." Maya picked up the contract Daniel had slid across the table with such smug satisfaction. She held it aloft, then tore it cleanly down the middle. The sound of ripping paper rang louder than any insult they had thrown her way. "This acquisition will not be happening. Instead, Carter Holdings will be exercising our rights as majority shareholders to call a vote of no confidence in this leadership." Daniel stammered, his voice breaking. You can't. You don't have that authority." Maya's eyes locked on his. "You asked who invited me here today." "The answer is your board of directors. They are already in an emergency session reviewing the evidence provided this morning." Daniel's phone rang, its shrill tone breaking the silence, his special ringtone for the chairman of the board. His hand shook as he answered, his face paling further with every word he heard. Around the table, other executives' phones lit up with texts and emails. Some faces registered horror, others relief. Clara met Maya's gaze across the table. For the first time that day, a small, defiant smile broke across her lips. The Crawford's dynasty had just been shattered. Security arrived within the hour. Men in dark suits entered the boardroom, not to protect the Crawfords but to escort them out. Daniel's protests echoed through the hallways, loud but powerless. His father moved slower, each step heavy with the weight of a legacy collapsing under his feet. Their access badges were cut immediately, their offices locked, their personal items packed into cardboard boxes. The same humiliation they had used on others countless times was now their own farewell. The emergency board meeting stretched into the evening. Maya stood at the head of the long conference table, no longer the outsider but the authority. She laid out the findings with precision, inflated valuations, hidden losses, misrepresented growth numbers. Every page was evidence, every word undeniable. Clara's USB drive proved critical. Within it were patents deliberately excluded from the acquisition report, internal memos burying bad news, emails mocking employees who had dared to question leadership. The executives who had laughed hours before now sat silent, faces gray as ash. "This isn't about revenge," Maya said firmly. Her voice carried across the room with quiet command. "This is about transformation. This company employs over 8,000 people. They deserve stability. They deserve leadership that sees them as more than disposable. Some resisted. A man with a cane, white hair and loyalty etched into his features, slammed his palm against the table. The Crawfords built this empire. We cannot erase 70 years of leadership with one vote. Maya met his anger with calm resolve. The Crawfords built something. Yes, but in the last decade they've dismantled it from within. Market share has slipped. Employees flee. Lawsuits pile up. Tell me, what's worth preserving? A name or a future? Marcus stepped forward with documents in hand. With the support of 6 other major shareholders, Carter Holdings now controls 53% of the voting shares. The room froze. In that moment, resistance died. The numbers spoke louder than sentiment. Across town in a glass penthouse, Daniel paced like a caged animal. His calls went unanswered. Business partners ignored him. Politicians distanced themselves. His father sat silent, nursing a glass of scotch that suddenly tasted like defeat. They're not answering, Daniel snapped, throwing his phone onto the couch. They don't need to, Charles replied quietly. They already know it's over. The next morning, Maya Carter stood in the center of a factory floor, the same place Daniel had paraded her through as though mocking a tourist. Workers gathered, wary but curious. The air smelled of machine oil and concrete. Change is coming, Maya announced. Not layoffs. Not cuts. Transformation. This company has survived on your dedication while leadership ignored your worth. That ends today. A hand went up in the crowd. A man in overalls, lines of exhaustion carved into his face. Why didn't you reveal who you were from the start? Why let them humiliate you? Maya paused. The room hushed. Because power used only for personal vindication achieves nothing, she answered. I needed to see how they treated me when they thought I was powerless. To understand how they treat you every day, that is how real change begins. Another worker stepped forward, his voice trembling. 18 years I've been here, passed over for promotions, watched less qualified men rise because of who they golfed with. Will it really be different now? Yes, Maya said firmly. Not because I promise it, but because we are rewriting the rules. Promotions will be transparent. Pay equity will be enforced. Executive bonuses will depend on your satisfaction, not theirs. The murmurs grew into voices. Voices grew into cheers. For the first time in years, hope reverberated through the walls. Meanwhile, Daniel tried to re-enter the building. He marched up to the executive entrance, his tie askew, his voice rising. Do you know who I am? He demanded. The guard blocked him without hesitation. Yes, sir, and that's why I can't let you in. Workers crowded the windows watching as Daniel Crawford III, once untouchable, was escorted off the property. Phones captured the moment. The man who had lived by humiliation was now humiliated before hundreds. That evening, in what had once been Daniel's office, Maya sat across from Clara Hayes. The walls were bare, the hunting trophies and portraits already removed. I'd like you to consider a permanent position, Maya said. Executive Vice President of Operations. Clara's breath caught. There will be backlash. People loyal to them will resist. Maya looked out at the skyline, the city humming with possibility. Change never comes without resistance. The question isn't whether it will be hard. The question is whether you're ready. Clara straightened her shoulders. When do I start? Miles away, Daniel tried one last desperate call. Senator Harlan finally answered, his voice clipped. Daniel, I cannot be associated with you. The committee is opening an inquiry. My office will issue a statement by morning. We donated millions to your campaigns, Daniel shouted. Which is exactly why I must create distance. The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone in disbelief. For the first time in his life, his money, his name, his family's influence, none of it mattered. The world was moving without him. 3 days later, the Crawford name was peeled off the tower in broad daylight. Workers balanced on scaffolding as they removed each letter, the metal groaning as 70 years of legacy came crashing down piece by piece. Employees gathered in the lobby, silent at first, then breaking into applause as the final letter clattered to the ground. It wasn't celebration of destruction. It was celebration of possibility. Daniel watched the footage from his penthouse, jaw clenched, eyes red. His father sat across from him, shoulders slumped, a man carved hollow by the weight of loss. When the family lawyer arrived with a leather briefcase, his face was grave. The evidence is overwhelming, he said flatly. Regulators have been alerted. Securities violations, misrepresentation. There's talk of criminal charges. That's absurd, Daniel snapped, pacing. We've done nothing illegal. The lawyer closed his case with a sigh. The line between aggressive accounting and fraud is thinner than you think. And your recorded words, hiding assets, mocking diversity hires, those cross it completely. And don't forget you implemented the company-wide policy that allowed those recordings. The irony landed heavy. Meanwhile, Maya Carter addressed employees in town halls across the company. She stood where Daniel once sneered, on the factory floor, speaking without notes, her voice steady and direct. This company is not broken. It was poisoned at the top. You are the foundation. Together we will rebuild, not with slogans or empty promises, but with transparency and respect. From now on, advancement will be earned, not inherited. Questions came rapid fire. Why trust her? Why believe change was possible? Maya answered each with conviction. Because we've tied leadership's pay to your satisfaction. Because promotions will be transparent. Because the structure that allowed the Crawfords to thrive no longer exists. Every answer was a nail in the coffin of the old order. Daniel's last attempt at control came when he stormed the building again, demanding to see the board. Security blocked him. He shouted, his voice breaking. Do you know who I am? The guard remained calm. Yes, sir. That's exactly why you can't come in. Employees at the windows recorded it, his rage echoing across the pavement. Daniel Crawford III, humiliated, powerless, shoved back into the world he thought he owned. The scandal reached Washington within weeks. A Senate subcommittee convened hearings, cameras flashing as Daniel sat under oath. The once polished air now looked gaunt, his suit ill-fitting, sweat staining his collar. Senator Harlan, the same man he once shook hands with at fundraisers, now stared him down with icy detachment. This committee is investigating allegations of fraud, discrimination, and systematic abuse of power under your leadership, the senator said coldly. Would you like to explain why only one of 27 executive promotions went to a woman or minority? Daniel stumbled through excuses about qualifications, pipelines, industry standards. Each time he faltered, another piece of evidence was revealed. Emails, recordings, sworn testimony. His words twisted into knots, and the world saw the unraveling of a man who had believed himself untouchable. By the time the hearings ended, regulators announced referrals to the SEC and Department of Justice. The Crawford dynasty was finished, its name now synonymous with corruption and arrogance. Months later, the industry had shifted. Boardrooms whispered about the Carter effect. Venture firms began demanding diversity metrics. Institutional investors asked new questions about workplace culture. Companies scrambled to reform, not out of charity, but survival. At the Waldorf's Grand Ballroom, Maya stood before an audience of leaders, journalists, and officials. Her voice carried across the chandeliers and velvet walls. Equity isn't charity. It is the foundation of stronger decisions and greater success. Companies with diverse leadership outperform peers. Inclusive workplaces aren't a dream. They are a competitive edge. This isn't about politics. It's about the future of business itself. Behind her, a screen displayed logos of corporations pledging to follow suit, a coalition led by what was once Crawford Global, now reborn as Carter Global. At her side stood Clara Hayes, no longer overlooked but serving as executive vice president, her shoulders squared with pride. Across town, Daniel Crawford sat in a modest office, the brass plate on the door reading simply, Daniel. No family crest, no dynasty, just a man pushing papers ignored by the very world that once bent to him. He saw Maya on the break room television receiving CEO of the Year, and for the first time he understood the truth. Power had not corrupted her. It had revealed him. A year later, he asked for a meeting. He arrived in off-the-rack clothes, posture bent, arrogance stripped away. Maya listened as he fumbled through an apology, his words clumsy but sincere in their vulnerability. When he asked if she had planned his downfall all along, her answer was calm. I didn't destroy you, Daniel. You revealed yourself. I simply made sure the world saw it. As he turned to leave, she offered something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not absolution, a chance. A mentorship program in underserved communities. A role that could allow him to build something meaningful for once in his life. He hesitated, then nodded. Not a hand up. A hand forward. 6 months later, Maya stood before a graduating class, faces bright with ambition and hope. She spoke with the same conviction that had carried her through humiliation, resistance, and triumph. You will face moments where the world tells you to shrink, to step aside, to accept less. In those moments, remember this. Patience is not surrender. Silence is not weakness. True resilience is knowing exactly when to reveal the power you already hold. The room was silent, hundreds hanging on her words. She paused, her gaze sweeping the future staring back at her. Power is not measured by who you can humiliate. It is measured by who you can lift. Applause thundered through the hall, echoing a truth that could not be contained. A truth that would ripple far beyond the Crawfords, reshaping an entire industry. Maya Carter had not just won a battle. She had changed the rules of the war.